Right, I've started recording. So I'll just introduce it again really quickly. We're talking about the difference between level 4 and level 5, and the fact that level 4 you can be descriptive and level 5 you need to make an argument. So this is a difference between two possible introductory paragraphs, sentences to assignments. At level 4 you might describe it like this. Many authors, such as Brueggemann, Long, Craddock, agree that preaching includes three partners: the preacher, the hearer, and the Bible. So can you see how that's a descriptive sentence? Okay. At level 5, you would be better saying, in this essay, I will show the development of the preaching triangle by reference to the works of. Okay. So you're not going to say that it exists. You're going to say it had a beginning and this is how it began, and it's developed and this is how it developed, and you've identified the sources that you're going to use. Having said that, even at level 5, because you're talking about development, those three references are the wrong way around, aren't they? You go 2018, 2005, 1997, and you'd actually do it the other way around if you were really making an argument. So check everything is in the right coherent order. And if you've only got 2,000 words, you are not going to be able to explain the whole of mission, or the whole of mission in your community, or even the whole of mission to parents in your community. You're probably going to do a really good job of discussing one tiny bit of mission. So you've just got to accept that. You can't say everything in 2,000 words. And one of the phrases I like to use is, don't think about skimming the surface. Don't tell me a little bit about a lot. Tell me a lot about a little bit. Okay. So go deep, go beneath the surface. Don't just skim over the top. And let's compare the learning outcomes. So you'll have looked at module descriptors in Moodle before you wrote an assignment. And these are typical level 4 ones. These are the Old Testament ones, so they'll be fresh in your mind. And you'll see the kind of language. Number 1, present a basic and consistent exploration. So it's basic, it's consistent, which is sensible, and it's just an exploration. Okay. So quite straightforward, descriptive. Number 2, discuss key theological concepts. So discusses at level 4, it might be so-and-so thinks this and so-and-so thinks that, and you might not even need to say, however, this is what I think at level 4. Consider the implications. Well, you might say it might mean this, might mean that. No commitment to it really. And demonstrate an understanding of homiletics in presenting a sermon appropriately. Okay, that's what you're familiar with. This is what's coming, I think. Look at the difference between the first one. Present an in-depth, consistent and critical exploration of a selected New Testament text. So you see the words that have been added. Okay? It's gone from a basic and consistent to an in-depth. So you need to know more about this. And consistent and critical. So you need to say what you think about it. Okay. Now, obviously, it's not just your random opinion. You need to side with some academic source and say, this is why I think that. However, I don't agree with them on such and such a thing. I'm more inclined to go with whoever it is. Okay. And critically explore key theological concepts. Might mean saying, for example, if we're doing, well, some of you were at the Luke thing at the cathedral today. So if we were exploring the theme of salvation in a New Testament module, I would want to say that in Luke's gospel, salvation is not about one person making some sort of commitment and becoming a Christian and being all right when they die. I would want to say, according to Luke, if you follow Luke's theme through, salvation is much broader than that, and it's social and political and economic and mental and physical and spiritual and all those things. And then I'd have to say, why do I think that? So I'd need a source who thinks the same as I do, and I need some texts from Luke that support that argument. But that's what critically exploring a theme means. Okay. And critical exegesis and hermeneutical skills means you need to go beyond reading a commentary and thinking, oh, I quite like that, I'll use that. To quite asking yourself, why am I using that? What is it I like about it? And if I don't use that, what happens to what I want to say? So there'll be commentaries where you would be in trouble if I was marking it, for example, if you used certain commentaries that are published by IVP, for example, you'd get in big trouble for that. Unless you said, from the extreme evangelical wing of the church, this is a particular belief. But on the other hand, some other people think something else. So try and find what the balance is, and try and find a good commentary or a source. You might not need to use a commentary at all. There are loads of other good sources, but always check what they are. And then number 4 is pretty much the same because it's a practical skill. So it's delivering your sermon. Any questions or issues up to now? No. Right.
Can I just ask a quick question? And
Yep,
this
yeah.
is probably just because I don't really have a particularly academic background. If you're looking in terms of GCSE and A level, and then beyond to degree level, where does level 4 and 5 come?
4 is first year degree level and 5 is second year degree level.
Okay, you see, I learn something every day.
Yeah, so you're thinking this, you finish just before you do the final year of a bachelor's degree. So foundation degree is like 2/3 of a bachelor's degree. So that's the kind of level that we're thinking. Okay. If you absolutely love it when you've finished and you've done your 2 years post-licensing training, you can go on and do a Bachelor of Theology degree, which some people are doing. But okay. So let's think about this text as a practical example. I'm hoping that the people teaching you New Testament don't pick it. Well, they won't be able to because your assignments are going to be on Luke's Gospel next year, and this is from Matthew, so we're probably on fairly safe ground. Okay. So your first response, I'll talk as though you behave like I do, but my first response when I read this passage is, oh, I know that one. And I know what loads of sermons have said about that. So I think I've got the idea of where this sermon might go. Now, if you know anything much about my preaching, then they'll say, that's what everybody else says, so what's different that I can say? That's the way that I do it. But we think we know this passage, don't we? It's the lost sheep, and the shepherd does something daft and leaves 99 and goes and finds the one and then celebrates about it. Okay, we've got all those tropes about it. At level 4, you might say, in this short parable, Jesus is teaching the disciples. Before this parable, he's told them to beware of causing others to stumble, and after it, he speaks of reproving those who sin. Here in the middle is the best known element of the chapter and one that is often told. That's straight level 4 because it's descriptive. Okay. This bit is taken from the assignment that I put into Moodle for you. Sorry, I'm instantly going to get my hay fever cough now. Most commentaries, references in literature, depictions in art put forward a similar and consistent interpretation of the parable of the lost sheep. It's traditionally been explained as being about Christ, the shepherd, leaving the flock of the righteous to rescue the one who's erred and strayed. So I immediately know as soon as I read this is going to be different. It's taken a critical approach because it says this is what traditionally it's been about. However, I'm going to do this. It's given comfort to countless generations by highlighting the loving character of God and by offering hope of redemption to the undeserving. So great summary in one sentence, really, about what people usually do with this parable. Yet, I have misgivings about that traditional stance. That's a brilliant entrance to what this student is going to do next. Okay, it's not taking loads of words. I've not counted them, but that's not loads of words out of 2,000, is it? And in that space of time, she's told me that she knows all about how the parables usually dealt with. She knows all about what I might be expecting. And she's thought about it for herself and she's going to do something different. Okay. Can you see yourselves writing this in a few weeks' time? I'm sure you can.
Liz, apologies if I'm confusing it a little bit. Referencing when it comes to that type of summarization in terms of multiple commentaries, you may be picking words out or phrases that appear and paraphrase them. What's your advice in terms of?
If I was writing this one,
yes,
I would probably put in brackets a string of names and dates.
Okay.
You know, so
yeah,
whoever it was, 2006 or something. I wouldn't need lots, but I'd put some. So that is a weakness. And then because you've said what they say, you can put them in your bibliography at the end as well. Because even in that short way, you've summarized what they've said. So here's a little thinking time for yourselves now. Because what might be helpful, you know, that first sheet that you get on your assignment that some people fill in and some people don't. The one thing that we've noticed is there's roughly a break point. This isn't true across every assignment or across every student, but there's a split point at about 52% where nearly everybody who gets above 52 has filled it in and nearly everybody who gets below 52 hasn't. So that sheet is actually really important because it makes you think about what you're trying to do and how you're going to show your learning in this assignment. So I do suggest that you use it if you haven't been using it. And this is a little bit of a practice in a way. What key differences do you notice? So you can do this in pairs probably. What key differences do you notice between level 4 and level 5? And what might you need to change about the last assignment that you wrote? How did you get on? What were the things that you were highlighting or talking about? Let's hear back from some of you. Yeah, Linda.
Amy and I were talking about planning and reading, and if we're going to do that, we need the reading list now and not September.
Let's talk about reading, because one thing is it's a mistake a lot of students make is you think if there's a book recommended, you've got to read it. You don't. You've got to read bits of it. And you've got to read the bits of it that are relevant to the week that you're asked to read it.
Don't we? We still need that information.
Yeah, we've got to wait for the university to approve our draft modules yet. But if you, I can give you access to some. The key book is in the hub. And it's Richard Cook's book called The New Testament, unsurprisingly.
I got that. Is this one?
Yeah, that's the key one.
I've got, yeah.
That's the key one.
That's the one you gave us the heads up that was in the sale that day.
Yeah, that's the key one.
So that's the key book. Okay.
Some of it depends on who is teaching you, because they might like to flog their own books like I do.
You're not going to put in the commercial tonight, then.
This one today.
I've got that one, which is not relevant, but
well, it depends how you read it, see, Nigel. Because if you were to pick, I don't know what the choices are going to be, but if you decided that you wanted to do thesis on the Ethiopian eunuch, then you'd find something really relevant in Black theology.
Yeah, that might be very useful.
So, you know, don't look for whole book. You're going to use a whole book. And you might need to keep going back over the same one. But read the bits that you need for your assignment and save the rest for after you're licensed. You know, and if it's not
Yeah.
relevant, however interesting it is, you've got to be absolutely ruthless and stop reading it, because it, you know, you've got to be pragmatic with books. These books are tools to help you achieve something. They're not novels to pass away a train journey or something. So be absolutely ruthless with them. If I look at some of the books I've got next to me now, because I was doing a little bit on my doctorate earlier on, there's a great thick book I've used about 10% of. It's just being realistic. Yeah. Who else has got something to say about what we talked about?
Talk about planning, weren't we? Yeah.
Sorry?
We were talking
Time. Yeah. Okay. 2 things about time. Don't think that you'll be able to write your assignment on the last minute. So also don't think that you're not preparing for your assignment when you're in class, because you are. So don't separate in your brain. This is time with a tutor and other students. This is writing my assignment time, and this is reading time. They all map together. And one thing, I trust my subconscious quite a lot. So I'll if I think I can't write another word, I go for a walk for about an hour. I don't sit there struggling, because there's no point. But your brain is always working on stuff. If you feed your subconscious stuff to think about, it'll think about it.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I see if I did a pie chart, I'd have probably about 80% of the whole pie would be going, oh my God, what have I got to do? I've got all this stuff to do. And 20% actually, even 20%, even if it's that much, actually doing it. Whereas if I restructured it, I wouldn't have to panic about for the 80% of the time. So I totally agree, but that's a discipline that takes quite a lot of practice, is to get up and walk.
Yeah. And the other one is, even if you've written a sentence that you really love, if it doesn't fit with the assignment, chuck it out. You know, I've thrown away about 5 times as many sermons as I've ever preached, because they sounded brilliant when I was reading them to myself, but when I thought about preaching them to a congregation. So don't be worried about chucking stuff out.
Right.
And if you really love it and you don't want to throw it out, have a file on your computer that you call rubbish or something. I've got one of those as well.
Discarded sermons may come in use at a future date.
Yeah. Because about 6 years after you've thrown it out, you'll go, oh. Yeah. But so think carefully about time. I know my supervisor says do a little bit every week. I can't do a little bit every week. It's a complete waste of time, because if I put aside 2 hours, it takes me the first hour to remember where I was last time. So, but I know I can get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do 12 hours on a Saturday or a Sunday or whenever. So that's how I work. So know yourself. You know, in the discipleship module and those, we talk a lot about knowing yourself. And you need to know yourself as a student as well as everything else.
Because we are all busy in our parishes as well.
Well, you shouldn't be. That's wrong. If you're on the training course, you're on the training course. You should not be busy in your parish.
Well, as you know, we're going into a vacancy in Timperley.
Well, that's the warden's problem, not yours. That's what church wardens are for.
Yeah.
So you should not ever, if you're training to be a reader, during that training time, you should not be busy in the parish.
Interesting, right.
I think we usually say that right up front during induction and times like that. Helen's probably heard it more times than she can. Yeah, so don't let, and especially in a vacancy, don't let the wardens go, oh, you're training, you can do that. No, I can't. Yeah.
That's very useful for me, thank you. Because of course, you know, there are pressures on you. People do expect, you think, oh, they I don't know, it can be Mothers Union, you know, oh, can you do such and such for us? You know, that sort of thing.
Yep.
There's always that extra pressure.
Well, there are two women in the Bible that I think are complementary to each other. Mary is the one who's always preached. She said yes to God, isn't she? Jolly good, excellent, lovely. But earlier on in the Old Testament, there's Hannah who said, no, that's not good enough. I'm not accepting this. I want to have a baby, and carried on. So yes and no can both be godly answers.
Okay.
Okay, so we've done time, we've done books. What else? What would anyone else talk about?
We talked
Yeah.
about, just pick on that book theme around the targeted reading in terms of that shift from
Yeah.
level 4 to level 5, finding the counter argument. So many times when we've read the commentaries, certainly when I was looking at the Old Testament, they were saying similar things, but then being
Yeah.
targeted in terms of just finding something that swings the other way, so then I can pick which
Yeah.
side of that scale do I sit on, or do I agree with both the elements that draw on. I think that's going to be the trick in terms of the time constraints of
Yeah.
finding those being really targeted. So perhaps
Easy
being more
way of
savvy with
finding
Google
stuff,
Scholar.
Yeah, look in the bibliography of the book that you're reading.
Yeah.
And see what they quote. Because if you find things like, you know, take someone trendy like Rob Bell, you know, really trendy preacher, very engaging, and you think, oh, I wonder whether what he's talking makes sense, or whether it's just American trendy stuff. And you look in his bibliography and it's all really sound good theologians. All he's doing is taking really good stuff and making it comprehensible. So you know that it's a reasonable thing to do. If you do end up on a website, always look at the about bit of the website and find out who it is, because quite a few people have accidentally cited Mormon websites, or you know, that kind of thing. So be really cautious, and also think about what else does that person believe. So you might have heard there's a theologian, and he writes quite a lot of Bible commentaries, called Wayne Grudem, and his name might pop up if you did a search, you know. But if you're going to read him, you've got to appreciate the fact that he will, well, it was a scandal in his church when they found out he'd read a book written by a woman. And he said he wasn't reading it for his theological education. He was reading it more like a conversation over a coffee table. Now, do you really want to cite that kind of person in your assignments?
No.
Find out who you're referring to as well. To be honest, the good stuff really is in the hub. The good appropriate stuff is in the hub. So use that as much as you can. Yeah.
We're talking about the online resource now, aren't we?
Yeah.
I've tended to shy away from it because I struggle with reading something online. I like to have a real book in my hand.
Well, I do. Yeah. It's a good way of sifting and thinking, well, I might get that, or I might, you know, well, I definitely won't get that one. I find online reading useful like that. But if it's something I'm going to work with, I want to be able to write in the margins and underline the words and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, in the university library, you've got access to journals as well. So you've got access to Journal of New Testament Theology and all that kind of stuff if you want it. And sometimes there are good articles in them. Sometimes it's not worth the bother, but sometimes there are. Okay. What were other
Just
people?
on that point, Liz, will our University of Chester logins, Joe, through Google Scholar, you sometimes university access to those first sources and articles. Does the University of Chester sign up to that? I know in previous universities I've been at.
Yeah.
They do. It all works.
Yeah, it all works fine. I use it every day nearly. Yeah.
Super.
Yeah. And if you can't quite find something, the library are really good and they get back to you really quickly. If you put in a query, an inquiry, yeah. And what did other people?
Can we access the library, Liz?
Yeah, you can access it when you log into your university Moodle. You can access it online. and you can go in. And if you go in, you can ask for a student card and you'll get one.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know that.
Can I just also add to that, because I think I've mentioned it before, my daughter trained as a nurse at Leighton, which is Crewe, but she said because they were Chester University under which they trained, you can actually get books brought out if you request it. They will actually transfer them, because obviously some of us don't live that close to Chester. Just a thought for those who were thinking, I want that book, can I get access?
Yeah.
And we'll transfer them, won't they, Liz, over to where books, if they can.
They will, yeah.
Which is helpful, which is handy, really.
Yeah. I mean, depending on what happens with COVID, if you live near Manchester, the Luther King Centre, as it's now called, has got a good library you can go and work in. If you live near the Welsh border, you can go to Gladstone's and go and work in there for a day. And the food there is brilliant, which it isn't at the Luther King Centre, sadly.
I've heard Luther King is lacking in that way.
Yeah. You could knock a nail in with their chicken escallops.
Yeah. Do you, because I live not too far from Luther King, I'm on the metro line. So would you have to book in with them, or?
I think you can just go if you, I mean, I don't know what's happening with COVID. You'd have to ring up and find out with COVID, of course, but.
I'm thinking later on, yeah.
Normally you were just able to pitch up. Same with Gladstone's, but yeah.
Oh, right.
But the university library is actually very good.
Yeah.
And they have spent this year transferring quite a lot of texts to online. So there's loads of stuff which you can just read, or you can print off a chapter of certain things or whatever. What did other pairs talk about?
I think it's that move from descriptive to critical and backing that up and having the courage to almost offer a counter argument. That idea that so-and-so believes this, but I don't. And then it's quite difficult to do that. It's quite intimidating, I think.
Yeah. And once you've cracked it, you've cracked it.
In a sense, when Tracy and I talked, we thought that in a sense, we will have already been thinking ourselves about scripture in order to preach about it.
Yeah.
And we will have had our own reflections and thoughts. And in a sense, therefore, we are thinking that critically, but it is kind of connecting it to the body of literature that might be out there on the subject.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I was having a long conversation this morning about someone's assignment. No one here, or no one in your year either, who insisted that there was only one Isaiah, and put that in a sermon. There is only one Isaiah. Don't believe all this rubbish. But then didn't give any supporting evidence that there might be only one Isaiah, or any arguments about how they got around the fact that they're written completely differently in different time frames. So, you can't just make a bold statement like that and think that you're upholding some kind of godly principle or something. You're just spouting rubbish, really. So don't do that. And, if at this stage, I would, although we always say, if you're going to reference the Bible, which obviously you will, use the NRSV, there will be times when the NRSV can be very sexist and very non-inclusive, and you might want to comment on that. And the best way, the translation that's closest to the Greek is the King James. So don't tell me what the NIV says. I'm not remotely interested in what the NIV says, or the Living Bible, or any of them. But if you wanted to do something or comment on, I think you had the discussion with Josie about the myth about the fall, and how sin got into the world and all that. And if your version of the Bible has got a title, you might want to say, well, the NRSV entitles it like that, and I think that's completely erroneous because, and explain why. Because at least even then, even if you can't think of anything better, at least you've shown you've engaged with it. Yeah. I mean, one of
I was going to say, it's just interesting for me to know that because for years I've been looking at basically other translations other than the King James version, and it's quite refreshing to know that actually in terms of closeness to the Greek, it seems to be stand up.
Yeah.
Is there anything else comparable in modern times or not?
I don't think there is. I mean, I think strangely enough, the Message has its moments, but Tom Wright's done some, when you get to New Testament, Tom Wright's done some quite good retranslations of texts that take into account his knowledge of Greek and of history and so on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think the other thing maybe to think about is the department of which we are a part, that's the Theology and Religious Studies department, is a department of practical theology. Not contextual theology, not systematic theology or any of those, but a department of practical theology. And practical theology says that doing theology is an academic discipline, but also a discipline of faith, an activity of faith. So somewhere along the line, there needs to be those two things. In what way is this academically rigorous, but also how does it impact my faith? Okay. And I don't mean saying something, you know, magic about suddenly God spoke to me and it was all in the sky and I knew for sure that this was the right thing to do. But maybe that challenge, like the thing we're doing at the cathedral thing today, that challenges my thinking because I realize that it's very patriarchal, something, you know. And if you're sensitive to that kind of language and issue, then you can pick that up quite easily. And you know, if you do a passage on, if you do some stuff on Jesus constantly bringing sight to the blind, what does that say about blind people then? You know, so there's all sorts of angles that you can take in which you just think critically about what's there on the page.
I think also when you're trying to think critically, it's very useful, isn't it, to listen to lots of different, well, I'm thinking, I mean, I listen to Lectio 365, which I think quite a few of us listen to that. And sometimes they look at things in a totally different way than you would expect. And I think we need to have a broad mind, don't we?
Yeah.
And not the liberal Catholic view of the parish that we are in, which is my parish. You got to have that broader outline, you know, and maybe.
Well, you can do two things. You can say, because it's practical theology, I am a liberal Catholic and that's the way I look at the world. And therefore, this is how I tend to interpret this kind of text. However, I am aware that there's an alternative interpretation and maybe a balanced view, which I would be happy with, would be. I mean,
you've then set out your argument, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the source that you mentioned, but there was one year when a couple of students were reading Selwyn Hughes Every Day with Jesus, and you just think, oh, really?
24-hour prayer app. Well, it was a 24-hour prayer app. It's an app. In fact, they do morning and evening prayer now.
Yeah, I mean, I would avoid things where people tell you what the passage means and read the passage. That's why I like morning prayer and night prayer, because you can end up very easily exegeting the commentator or exegeting what somebody says the passage means without actually going back and saying, actually, that's not what it says at all.
Yeah.
So constantly engage with the biblical text rather than, and do that first. You know, the way that we taught you to preach, think about who I am when I come to this passage. Who am I? Because no matter what you do, who you are will affect how you read that text. You know, you can't do anything about that. It will. What about other groups? Anything else to add?
Eve and I were talking, and I think the biggest leap that I'm going to have to make really is how much time I'm spending on my assignments and making use of the resources available.
Yeah.
I've absolutely loved it. You know, I mean, whereas in the past I've actually seen, or I've been looking for the finish line, I've actually enjoyed the journey this time, and I've really wanted to get more immersed in it. And yet I've not put that discipline in place where I've got things that I can just dive into, you know, when I have the time to do it, when my schedule actually, you know, the odd 5 minutes here and the odd 5 minutes there, and after the hour a day or whatever that I've actually got in my diary, I definitely need to organise my time better.
Yeah.
And get my resources, you know, what I can actually use much more accessible, and make use of people as well, you know, people who've actually done it, people who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And do that. So there's loads, there's absolutely loads. I'm excited, you know, it's
good.
It's, you know, it's just all, you know, it's all consuming. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's all there. I just need to get the discipline to actually, you know, get stuck in.
Timetabling and time planning is absolutely crucial. I mean, I'm doing a full-time job. I'm doing a doctorate. I look after my grandson one afternoon a week, and I've also got family and watch football and all those things. But every Sunday afternoon before Sunday tea, I sit down, think, what do I need to achieve this week, and plan every slot.
Yeah.
You know, and if I think I need to make a phone call, I can make a phone call at the same time as having a cup of coffee. So 11 o'clock is probably a good time to do that. And then I think, right, I've only got half an hour that day, so I need to do a tiny bit that isn't very much and make some notes about it. Yeah. And this morning it just so happened, because the sun was shining, I woke up about 4 o'clock, so I could do 3 hours reading before I got up, which was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one Saturday a few weeks ago, and we had a session to prepare for, and it was looking at, it was wisdom texts. And for some reason, I don't know what was different about that particular Saturday. I do know that it was snowing and the dogs were very quiet, so that made a nice change. It was very cozy, and my husband had just done a night shift on the Friday night, so he was in bed. My youngest was studying or playing computer games, who knows, in her bedroom, and I spent practically the entire morning and half of the afternoon looking up proverbs and getting in writing. I've got a book with notes that I wrote, which ultimately weren't needed for the session.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed doing.
That's one.
Taking that enjoyment out of actually the learning, not just doing the stuff that I need to do.
That's one thing I have found, is I've got loads and loads of notebooks, because I don't find I think onto the screen, I think onto paper, because there's something physical about having a pen in your hand and doing that helps you remember it when you want it to come back. So I've got loads of notebooks which are for all sorts of things, and I only do the final, or the first and second and final draft onto my computer. The rest of it is a bit of a mess, really, if you looked at it. What I'm going to do next is how to structure an assignment. So do you want to move on to that, or is there anything burning that you want to write?
No, sounds good to me.
Let's do that then. So this is what I call a standard assignment shape. It starts broad, goes narrow, and then goes broad again. And these are the sections. So your introduction, like I just showed you, is these are all the things that I could say. And you say that in however you want to say it. And then you narrow it down to, but this is what I am going to tell you. And I'm going to do it in 3 parts, or however many. It won't be more than 3. It might be 2. And then you do part 1, part 2, part 3. And then you say, these are the implications of what I've just said. And this is what it could mean for a wider setting. Okay, so you start broad, you move in, you explore in depth what you're going to say, and then you go wider again. Or the posh version of that might look like that. Okay. So you give the background and the context, which is exactly what the student did who wrote the assignment about the lost sheep. Loads of people do it like this. This is the tradition, blah, blah, blah. But I've got a problem with that, and this is what I want to talk about. Okay. And then you, at the beginning, straight after you've done that introduction, you must give the outline of your argument, because the first thing the examiner or the assessor wants to do is find out, where are we going with this? Okay. They've told me this is what usually happens. They've told me they're not going to do what usually happens. So what are they going to do? And you need at least a line that says what your argument is. And if you can't do that, that means you're not ready to write the whole thing yet. Okay. You need to be clear what your argument is, what you're trying to say, before you start exploring the parts. And then you might have 3 points that you're going to talk about, 1, 2, 3. Summarize those 3 together so that the examiner can see that they belong together again. Restate what you've said and then say, in the context of my church, in the context of preaching, whatever it might be, this is what that means. I'll just let you have a look at that structure for a little bit. I've consistently used it for this is the one I've been using. That looks like that, a bit more complex. But I've been using that for writing the chapters of my doctorate, and I found it really, really helpful because it stops you going off track. You know, if you just sit down and start writing at the top and finish writing when you think you're finished, there's all sorts of threads dangling out, aren't there? And it gets rid of those threads. And actually, the time that you need to spend most on is that little bit. What's my argument? What am I trying to say? And that might take hours, days, couple of weeks to get to that. But once you got to it, you can write the whole thing. Now, you want to think about that for a minute together? Does that make sense? That the structure is absolutely key to it. And you might have a lovely sentence that belongs in a different section. And you might need to, between each of these sections, let me just share it again. Between these sections, there's got to be a link, okay? So at the end of my argument in outline, say, right, now I'm going to talk about this. So you signpost section 1. The end of section 1, you do a mini summary. Now I'm going to talk about this. Section 2, mini summary of section 2. Now I'm going to talk about this. Section 3, summarize section 3, summarize the whole thing, bring it together, and write a nice conclusion. Okay.
Right at the top, you talk about the issue, the debate. Typically, sort of in a contrasting style essay, you will say, on the one hand, on the other hand. But I suspect that in this kind of essay, there won't be a lot of space for that.
No. Partly because we want you to come to a conclusion about what you think. So you can write 10,000 words on some people say this and some people say that, can't you? Or on the one hand and on the other hand. But because this is practical theology, what we want is the overview of the ground, if you like, and then the bit that you stand on a bit more deeply. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it really is about spending time thinking about what you think on this. And having some, and then gathering your evidence, you know, gathering your sources. Who thinks the same, who disagrees, who agrees. And if you think of it in terms of those sections, the first thing I do is think, what am I going to put in each of those? And then and then that helps you with your time planning. Because once you know, once you've got a detailed plan of what goes in each bit, then you know that in an hour you can write section 1. Because you know exactly what goes there. And all you're doing is the joining up bit. Same with section 2 and 3. And then when you go back to do your editing, because I would always say finish at least a week before it's due in, because you need to do some editing. Quite often the best way of doing editing is read it out loud to yourself, because you'll hear where it goes wrong. You know how you can tell when a preacher's lost the way because they shout louder? You can hear yourself doing it. If you read something and you trip over it, you think, I've not thought that out very well. Or even when I was struggling with part of my doctorate, I literally printed out all the sections, laid them out on the floor and tried to walk between them to see where the links were. And when I couldn't find a way of getting from one piece of paper to another piece of paper, I knew that's where the gap was in my argument. You can tell I'm a weird thinker, can't you? It is about structure, about how do you get from A to B in this assignment?
I think what I'm just rattling around my head at the moment is applying those archetypes you spoke about at the start and that structure against what the question says, and not getting lost in the words of the question. Against, I'm just reflecting on some of the questions perhaps from the level 4 assignments, and actually getting lost in the detail of the words rather than the what I'm trying to say. And I suppose without having a reference point in terms of what the level 5 shape of those questions have looked like in previous years, I'm just trying to then make that link between.
Well, one of the modules you're going to be doing is a module called Selected Biblical Texts and Themes, because we couldn't think of a longer title. So let me find the question for that if I can. I'm into completely the wrong place now. And there are 2 aspects. I mean, this is a different sort of assessment, actually. There are 2 ways that module is assessed. The first one is a group presentation. So everybody submits the same piece of work. So that's partly about how you work together as well. And the other one is a seminar paper. And the question is quite deliberate. So let me find it. Some silly person's been editing this today. That was me. There we go. Home. No. My courses. Selected biblical texts and themes. And it was all about the Psalms. And the question was, that was not the year before, so that's not the right one. There we go. No, sorry, I've just been altering these modules around a little bit to try and work out how they fit best together. Right. So where's the question in here? So the idea is we start off with how do you actually read the Bible and how do you understand the Bible, and then do some stuff on the Psalms, and then we give you the marking criteria. And the seminar paper was how do I think the Psalms should be used? Oh, here we go. Assignment 1, this is the group assignment. How may the Psalms be interpreted to be of relevance to the contemporary reader? Okay. That's the question. How may the psalm be interpreted to be of relevance to the temporary reader? So if we look at that structure again, we might start off by saying, well, everybody uses the Psalms and loads of churches sing them and lots of churches say at least one every Sunday. And most people use them to comfort other people, or we use them pastorally and we find them really comforting, you know, and if you're feeling fed up, you go to the Psalms. However, what I want to say is that that's a very partial view of the Psalms. So that's your introduction, that's your argument. And then the first point might be most of the Psalms are actually whinging Psalms rather than Psalms of praise. And then you demonstrate that. A second point might be the Psalms are actually not about praising God, they're about expressing human emotion. And then you go through that. And then you say, so as a result, I might use these pastorally, but instead of saying I'm using it to make people feel better about themselves, I would use it to say it's fine to get cross with God. Okay. Does that explain that?
Yes. Yeah. And as long as there's a how question, yeah, I can see the natural link. I think I'm more concerned in case it's those questions don't so for example, when we're in foundations, you know, we'd have a label of reflect on such and such, and then as things change, perhaps we don't have the reflect on, but we still use the reflective model we've learned. So it's just making sure actually, it's that question, isn't it? So the question fits the structures that we're providing. So that definitely makes sense in terms of how that example fits the structure you're telling us about.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble, I can't remember if you do a reflective piece next year, but one of the problems I have with the way you do theological reflection on foundations is you keep going round and around the same circle, basically, don't you? Because there isn't a way off, you're stuck on the roundabout. And so I don't like that kind of theological reflection. So in my book, what I say is think about the problem from 4 different aspects. So if we were thinking about COVID, for example, we might say, how do we think about that in terms of the news? Well, there's not been any good news about COVID for a few weeks now because people like, you know, the drama and everything of the Indian variant, that kind of thing. What's my position on it? Well, you know, it's quite a good idea if people behave responsibly, might be. What's my experience? Well, personally, I've not had any. I don't know anyone I do know 2 people who've had COVID, but they're fine now. What does the Bible say about it? And those would be my 4 approaches. So that might be the 4 sections instead of 2 or 3 down the middle. And then I would say, so a balanced view might be that this isn't God getting fed up with the world and trying to judge us all. This is a natural thing that's come about because, you know, so the structure still works as long as the model of theological reflection works. But if you look on the interminable circle or whatever it's called, it's not called that, is it? What's it called? I can't remember what they really call it, but that's what I call it. Yeah.
Well, that's helped in terms of that.
Good. Yeah. Anyone else? I mean, you can have mini arguments within your big argument, but they need to fit together. Just on that, obviously that module is going to be assessed quite differently from what you used to, but you'll get loads of guidance through it. So on presenting your seminar paper, you'll present it to each other, and the same thing will apply. You need an introduction, 3 points and a conclusion. And on the group assignment, you need to decide who's going to do which section and how does it fit together, and have one person who's the editor who makes sure that you've not got one sort of outlier somewhere in the piece. You know, it's got to sound like it's one assignment, not one assignment plus a bit or whatever. No dissenting statements, that's the word. Yeah. Okay, any more on that? I would say a couple of things. I'd say from experience of this year, if you're asked to do a sermon, don't do a PowerPoint, because PowerPoints are time consuming, and we will cut you off at 5 minutes if it's a 5-minute sermon. So don't do it. I would definitely say that, and the same with the seminar paper. You know, if you really must do a PowerPoint because it helps you, then do. But they are called bullet points for a reason. It's because they kill you with boredom sometimes. Oh, reflection. That was one thing I was going to say. If you're asked to reflect on something, that means how do you feel about it? So it's got to be about you, you know. If you're asked to reflect on, I don't know, let's go for COVID again. If you're asked to reflect on how you think COVID has affected worship, that doesn't mean you're meant to look around your congregation and say, well, they got it wrong and they got it wrong, and what they should have done was what I think. It means I found this really hard. I suddenly discovered that actually being in a building does mean something to me when I didn't think it did, whatever it is. Okay. I think that's everything. It's next year is not going to be a bit like the first term this year. It's not going to be one term, one module, another term, another module, quite, because some of the modules are going to be intertwined with each other a little bit. And the reason is because we don't want you to think, right, I know in the New Testament module, I know all about this, but now I'm in the mission module and I don't understand it anymore. You know, it's a holistic program. So if you know something in the New Testament module, you also know it when you get to the mission module. That's why we use those forms again at the beginning of your assignments, because your knowledge and your skills are transferable between them. So do carry your knowledge and your experience with you. I think I'm going to be able to give you the timetable fairly definitively next week, hopefully. But the only thing I haven't worked out, we're going to stay online, but my aim is that once a term we'll have an evening together, and once a term we'll have a day together, and the days will be at Fox Hill, because it's a nicer environment.
Yeah,
and you don't have to take your butties. So I'm not sure about the evenings, whether we'll be lucky enough to get to Fox Hill for the evenings or not. But that's the big aim. And I am planning on the 25th of September, I think it is. A little part of that day will be an introduction to living in love and faith. Probably an hour or something. And the diocesan advocate for living in love and faith is going to be with us to do that. Okay. So I'm trying to bring in a variety of people to do stuff. The mission module, similarly, there's going to be a day that's part of the mission module that's going to be from the Catholic wing of the Church of England, talking about mission in a Catholic context. And then the tutor who does most of it is Glyn Jones, who some of you know, who works with the Light College and trains evangelists. So you'll get both angles from that. And New Testament module, the first 5 weeks, I think, with Robert Evans, who used to be a senior lecturer at the university. And then the second 5 weeks are with Andrew Rudd, who you already know.
Liz, can I just ask about the 4 week that we've got with Christopher?
You can, yeah.
Understanding congregations is that in preparation for next year?
No, it's a module part. It's a level 5 module.
Right. Is there an assignment at the end of it?
I think there are 2 assignments at the end of it, not in 4 weeks' time, at the end of the module. The module carries on until February, I think.
Oh, right. Oh, that was something Amy and I were puzzling over. Oh, so that is part of next year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that right.
Yeah, but because there's some specialist language and stuff in it, it's better to do it over the summer, and then you've got the July and August to think about the module and to do some of the preparatory work for it.
That makes sense. Okay.
Were you still thinking about doing the days on a Sunday, did you say a while ago, or you were muting possibly?
I think it's going to be a mixture. So what, there'll be one that's a Saturday, I think, and the rest will be Sundays. Or there might only be 2. And you've got the weekend away, of course, which will be whenever that'll be. Can't remember. I think you've got a weekend away. It might not be till next September, actually, but I've got lost with having the.
You mentioned.
Go on. What did I say?
You mentioned the 25th of September, so that's a Saturday.
That's
so it
right,
sounds like
yeah.
that's a day at Fox Hill.
Yeah, that's a day at Fox Hill. Yeah, yeah.
Right, yeah, that's sort that into the diary now.
Because the people who are about to be licensed will be there, and also the people coming behind you. So the next new ones will be there as well. So that'll be quite nice.
Mm. That'll be quite a buzz that day. That'll be good. Mm.
Yeah, and pastoral workers will be there as well. So that's good. Yeah.
It would be really, I know you're working on it really hard, Liz, but it would be really helpful to have those dates, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I wasn't actually sure kind of when we started again, so.
Well, it'll be the same as last year, so it'll be the first Wednesday in September. It'll be the 8th, that's the second Wednesday, isn't it? Is the 1st of September?
Have a look.
Let's have a look. Yeah, to September.
Yeah, the 1st is a Wednesday.
The 8th, you start back.
Yay.
Yeah, yeah. One of the issues we've got this year, which you may or may not have picked up on the diocesan website, is Christopher Burkett retires at the end of July. So he's carrying on doing this module for us, but it leaves a great big hole in the staff team.
Oh, right.
And at the same time, David Herbert is retiring on the same day. So that leaves another great big hole in the staff team.
Mm.
So at the moment, we're trying to confirm who's going to be available for teaching. And obviously, we've got the people coming in after you, 2 post-licensing years, and then the bachelor's degree group. And it feels like we're trying to share out fewer resources among more groups. So, And one of the difficulties, of course, is there's only like 7 days a week. Well, there's actually only 4 evenings a week, aren't there? Because nobody wants to do study on a Friday evening. So.
So that date in September, is that our first opportunity to actually physically meet?
I believe it is, yeah.
See that we've got legs.
Yeah, see how tall everybody is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it is, yeah. And then you might want to go to the licensing of the people above you. That's the 9th of October.
All right.
In the cathedral, hopefully. But again, we don't know, do we, with COVID? We don't know what's going to happen. You see timetables. Year 3. Yeah, so 25th, that'll be another Understanding Congregations Day, apart from the bit on living in love and faith. The 8th of September will also be Understanding Congregations. And then the 15th and 22nd will be New Testament. And the 29th onwards will be New Testament. The 4th of November, you'll be at Fox Hill again. That's the mission in Catholic Church, Catholic theology. So basically it's Wednesday evenings and those 2 Saturdays.
What was that date for the Catholic one?
The 6th of November.
Ah, right, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
A new book's come out on sort of Catholic mission, because my incumbent has got hold of it, and we're going to do a study group on it with yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks very good. Yeah. You can tell how many books I've got around me on my desk. Have you actually read the Black Theology one, Nigel, or are you reading it?
I've only just started on it, to be perfectly fair. Yeah, I got it at the same time as the New Testament text, because I thought, oh, I really should actually have a look at this.
Yeah, that was for Lent. I decided I'd read Black Theology in Lent.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. I mean, I think the New Testament book is very readable, so you'll probably enjoy that one.
Yeah.
It's quite conversational, isn't it, when you're reading it?
Well, it was written specifically for readers in the first place, for trainee readers in Coventry. That's why. Yeah. I think I've
sharing experience of reading books. I've finished that one.
Oh right, yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Good.
That was a really good read.
Yeah. Maybe you should have, when it's coffee break or something on a Wednesday, you should have a sort of 10-minute book group. What have you read this week that was really good?
Good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're feeling happy then? Do you think I've answered what questions you might have come with?
Yes.
Yeah. Anything new about? I don't suppose there's anything new really to say about bibliographies. It won't change much from the past year, will it?
No. The mission one probably won't change. I mean, I might. Steve Sheridan, who's doing the day on the Catholic mission, might propose that you read that one, and it is very good. But you know, if you don't want to, I can't remember what it costs. About £15, is it? I can't remember.
Yeah.
If you don't want to spend the money on it, then ask the university library to get it in. The digital version of it, because it will be a good contrast to what else you're doing. I don't. The New Testament one won't change, and if Robert Evans wants you to read something, it'll probably be his own, and he'll own the copyright, and so he'll be able to stick it in Moodle. The selected biblical text, there actually wasn't a set book, I don't think, because our aim was to think about how you look at the Bible differently. So we put bits of things in to read, but one of the things it might be worth, I'll put a note in. It might be, I'll just check. The tutor for that's Bev Jameson. I don't know if you know her. She's vicar in Lymm. And her master's degree was on Psalms. So there's bits of human psychology and stuff. But just looking at it, I think she put everything in. So there's very little extra reading for that one. Yeah.
Hmm.
We'll carry on using Zoom, I think, as long as George doesn't insist that we go to Teams, which would be dreadful.
No, please, please, please don't go to Teams. It's absolutely awful.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah, yeah, it's shocking. I still can't manage to share a screen on Teams. I just get the hamster wheel of doom. But yeah. But no, well, if he starts to say that, I'll say, right, you're a student, write to him and tell him.
Yeah.
Seriously, they have not got their act together in Microsoft
haven't.
on the Teams at all, or not on that aspect of it.
No, they haven't. No, it's a nightmare. But, so I keep saying very loudly that we need to stick to Zoom, but it just depends who listens, really. Okay, no more questions.
Yeah.
You can
Thank you.
Yeah, that's been really helpful.
Good. Okay.
That's been great. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much.
I'll go for a
Thank
walk
you.
now.
It's not here, yeah. Bye.
Well,
Bye.
thanks.